You're listening to the Chopped Podcast, episode number 172. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I am your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Today's episode is brought to you by the Grow Your Food Blog webinar. Do you want to grow your food blog? Do you feel like there are more tools and tricks you should know to help you reach that goal? Do you want to unleash the power of Google Analytics to help you grow? Or maybe you have an older blog and you know you want to SEO optimize some of that older and even some of your best content. If so, this webinar is for you. It's taught by Brandy Crawford of the site Stay Snatched, who grew her blog from 0 to 1.3 million page views per month in only 2 short years. It's also taught by myself. I went through an SEO review of my site last year, and I'll be sharing with you some of the tools I created to make transforming my content into SEO optimized pages. It can be tedious work, but having the right tools helps so much. All participants will get access to impressive spreadsheet templates that Brandy, who is a CPA, and myself, an MBA, created. One of the things that make these spreadsheets so impressive are their formulas, of course, but they're also very user-friendly. So we'll make sure that, the fields that you're accessing are fields that are easily understandable. Every webinar participant will also have their name in a hat to win a 1-hour consultation session. We'll be giving away 2 of those 1-hour sessions, one with me and one with Brandy. The webinar takes place on Thursday, February 28th at 1 p.m. Central. It will be 90 minutes long, including presentation and plenty of time for Q&A. We're in the midst of early bird pricing right now, so don't delay. Go to chopped.academy/grow to order your ticket today. So on to today's topic. Today I'm talking with Amber Bracegirlde and Eric Hochberger, both co-founders of Mediavine. You may think of Mediavine as an ad network. I know it's easy to go there because that's kind of our main access with them, but they describe themselves as so much more than that. And in fact, they've recently created a new product called Create, and that's really the main focus of our discussion today because they want to talk about all the features that it has and all the ways that food bloggers can use them. So if you've struggled with finding the right recipe card for your food blog, Create is a beautiful resource. Not only does it come with recipe cards, it also has a DIY card for crafters and a list card for things like recipe roundups. I know what you're thinking. Does Create provide nutrition for recipes? How easy is it to convert my recipes? How much does it cost? And all of those things. I have all the same questions myself. Eric and Amber answer all of those questions and more. So I think we should just get straight to it because they answer those questions way better than I can. So let's get to it. Here's today's featured discussion with Amber and Eric. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Amber Bracegirlde and Eric Hochberger. They're 2 of the 4 co-founders of Mediavine, and they're on the show today. Hey Amber and Eric, welcome to the Chop Podcast.
Thanks so much, Marley. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you both. So Amber, this is like your 3rd time on the show, so I think people know who you are. You should get a gold star.
Well, I just love you. I'm happy to be here.
You too. Yeah. You have no idea. I mean, you've come to my conference.
Mm-hmm.
I just getting to know you. You've changed. I know you've done this for so many food bloggers, so it's not just me personally, but you have changed my relationship to my food blog so much.
Oh, that's such a wonderful thing to hear. It never gets old hearing stuff like that. I'll tell you that much. Eric and I both it's why we do what we do.
Yeah, well, it means a lot. So I want to encourage listeners to go back to listen to episode 34 and 138. That's where you were on previous times. You were talking about SEO hacks and viewability.
Mm-hmm.
And those were both amazing episodes. We've got a lot of really good feedback on those. So I encourage people to go listen to that. But Amber, for those people who haven't listened to that, and maybe they don't know who you are, could you kind of give a brief description about your role with Mediavine?
Sure. So, I started with Mediavine and Eric, back in 2012. He and I met at a food blogging conference. I've been a food blogger since 2008 is when I hit publish on my first post. And Eric asked if I would help them come and start a food site. So we started a website called Food Fanatic together, and we still run that to this day. But somewhere along the way, Eric decided that he could build some stuff that would run advertising better on our sites than what we were using elsewhere in the world. And I happened to mention it to my best friend, and it sort of opened up this can of worms, where we started doing advertising for 6 food bloggers that I counted as close friends and also contributors to Food Fanatic. And we are now over the 4,300th website that we work with.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I remember you
Oh yeah,
talking
I
about it.
mean,
It
we
was
literally had decided to do it
yeah.
days before you and I recorded that first podcast. And I remember, like, I very specifically
Yes.
remember I was at my parents' house when we recorded that. And I told you about this thing that we were maybe doing after we finished recording.
Yeah.
I can't talk like you can't talk about it, but this is coming. Watch out for it. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah. That's pretty exciting. So, Eric, welcome to the show. I would love for you to talk a little bit about how it is that, first of all, I'm kind of curious what you were doing at a food blogging conference, and also, just what made you start Mediavine.
Yeah, so we actually started Mediavine, funny enough, in 2004, which is an eternity ago, as an SEO for hire shop. Within a couple of years of that, we actually launched our own site, thehollywoodgossip.com, because 3 guys who had such a passion for celebrity gossip got together and did that. But really, it's just using our own SEO tricks for ourselves. And we found that was just like a great area. And that's similar to actually what made us want to get into food. At the time, we had an ad rep firm, and they kept telling us the reason you're not making enough money on the Hollywood Gossip is because you have to blog about more lifestyle stuff you should really check out. And they gave us a few verticals, one of which was food. The 3 of us knew at least a little bit about food compared to the other topics they gave us. And we figured it would go really well with our SEO strategy just because there's so much evergreen content to recipes. So we maybe came at it from the wrong angle from a money standpoint, but that's kind of what led us to, we wanted to start a food blog, but we really knew nothing about it. So that's what drew me to food blogging conferences to kind of learn. And I think it was the second one I ever went to. And it also helps that I've now a mutual friend with Amber, but at the time a friend of mine, Josh, who used to speak at food blogging conferences, and I tagged along with him. And at one of them is where I met Amber, because
I'm a loudmouth.
Amber's very vocal. She spoke up quite a bit during some of the panels, and I knew this was the one I had to talk to learn about this space. And so that's kind of how we weirdly not only fell into food blogging, but got to meet Amber.
And then it's from, so your main purpose, it sounds like, was to start Food Fanatic, but then from that came this realization, like, wow, something has to be done about advertising on food blogs. And that's where, Mediavine, as quote, the ad network side of Mediavine started.
Yeah, I mean, it happened pretty organically just because the Hollywood Gossip was struggling with its ad revenue and Food Fanatic obviously as well. So we were solving it for ourselves. And I don't think we ever had a chance to really work directly with bloggers prior to Food Fanatic. So like TV Fanatic and the Hollywood Gossip was mostly freelance writers. But Amber, with the multi-contributor model she set up for Food Fanatic, was our first chance to work with directly with bloggers. And that's when we realized, they share all the same pains as us.
Yes.
So
I don't even know if there probably are some people that are either new to food blogging or they just did not understand. They may not understand how difficult it was. First of all, food bloggers are expected to be experts in so many areas, but back before, you're saying 2012 when you started the ad network?
Well,
is that right?
So we started working together on Food Fanatic we met in 2012, late in 2012, and started Food Fanatic like in January of 2013. And then the ad stuff didn't start until June of 2015.
So basically food bloggers had to do their own ads. I mean, it was highly complicated. I mean, we were all doing these waterfall things where we, where we're trying to figure out how we had these ads displayed. It was very difficult and not very rewarding either.
No, I mean, I remember just on my own website, like the funny thing is, part of all of this rolling out is that Eric was hesitant to put these badly performing ads from our ad management at the time on Food Fanatic. We had not put advertising on Food Fanatic at that point. We were basically the guy's opinion was like, you only get one chance at a first impression. Don't put ads on the site until it's worth it. And we still have that opinion, right? Like that's part of the reason that we have a joining threshold, is that it's really not worth it before a certain point. And I was dealing with all of that on my own website on Bluebonnet Baker. Was dealing with an ad company that didn't care, and my money would show one thing at the start of like going through the month, and then at the end of the month it would like all get reconciled against discrepancies, and I'd be earning 20% less than I thought I was. And it's like, well, what the heck? What happened here? And there was never any explanations. There were never any like, what can I do better? There were no answers to those questions. Which is the exact same thing that Eric, Matt, and Steve were experiencing with their ad provider, even with a giant website that The Hollywood Gossip is. So knowing that that literally it doesn't matter how big or how small your website is, people are just not treating you with the respect that your valuable audience deserves, is sort of the thing that made us think, hey, maybe we can do this a bit different.
Yes, and in fact, it's so. I mean, I've experienced all different levels of that. So, like either doing it myself or working with a previous ad network to Mediavine, that was pretty terrible, and then switching over to Mediavine. And I can just say, in my mind, Mediavine makes ads for food bloggers or bloggers in general that work with you all, just almost turnkey. I mean, there's some things that you need to know, but for the most part, it just seems like it's so easy. I thank you all every day.
No, you love hearing that stuff, don't you, Eric?
That's why we work the insane hours we do.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the threshold. I would like to just quickly go over that for people, because I've been in certain circles where people ask that question, and there seems to be some confusion at times. It's 25,000 page views a month. Is that correct?
It's 25,000 sessions.
Okay.
So we actually moved away from the page view model. Very famously had a blog post called Page Views Are Dead and Miley Cyrus Killed Them. That was, sort of a nod to our roots in the Hollywood Gossip. But the thing is, when you focus on page views, you kind of focus on the wrong things, right? You focus on driving that page view number up, which can get you trying to make things like horrible slideshows where to get to the next piece of content, you're refreshing the entire page. That's not
terrible.
Good. Yeah, it's terrible user experience. It's not good for retention of readers. It's not good for retention of pretty much anything, really. But it drives that page view number up. And the other thing is that page view numbers can actually be gamed quite easily, whether intentionally or unintentionally, especially just by duplicating your Google Analytics tracking. So we were giving the message to people probably 3 or 4 times a week, at least, that their analytics were doubled or tripled, or the record I think was quintupled. Which meant that someone thought that their traffic was 5 times as big as it was.
That just hurts my heart for that person.
I know. Oh, it was awful. And so it was as much a morale thing as it was trying to get bloggers. I mean, that we're opinionated, right? We try to get bloggers to focus on what we feel are the right things about blogging and being in this industry all the time. And one of the things was we really wanted people to move away from this slideshow model, and anything that sort of created terrible user experience but drove a page view number up. Like, that's not a good long-term plan, and we are long-term thinkers. So we just, really made that change over to sessions, and have kind of pushed forward with that ever since, because you can't really double a session when you double analytics. And it sort of tells a better story, because a session is showing sort of the entire time that a reader's on your website. Like if they click around and stuff like that, like you can have one session, but 5 page views. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm sure Eric can share a little bit more about why he wanted to make that change, because he was really the driver behind that.
No, Amber hit on all the right things. It makes us optimize for the right thing, and it makes publishers optimize for the right thing. We want to be rewarded for a user having a longer session, a user going to more pages, as opposed to being rewarded for having them go to fewer pages. And that's kind of the model of the page RPM versus the session RPM. So we really like to optimize towards session RPM, and that's why we obsess over it. And everything Amber mentioned is why we use that for the kind of the minimum. It's way too easy to either on purpose or accidentally gain the page views. So
I'm wondering if you get a lot of applications to be a part of Mediavine in December, at least for food bloggers, or do you require that it's over a period of several months that they have that traffic?
So we have actually like a custom template and this has probably been in place after you joined us, Marley. So you may not have even gone through this. But Eric actually created a custom Google Analytics template that pulls out a lot of information from your analytics that helps us vet whether or not our ad partners are going to be willing to bid. And it's things like, what are your top pages that are getting traffic? And, what's your breakdown between mobile and desktop and tablet? And where are you getting traffic from? And so it helps us to keep the quality of sites that are on Mediavine to be quite high. And, we're able to look at things like how old is your domain? And then also what pages are getting traffic. So if you've got 30,000 page views in December, but all of them are going to a post about your best Christmas cookie, we may not take you on simply because we don't have any proof that you're receiving any kind of traffic outside of December. Right. So a lot of times we'll come back to someone like that and say, well, can we see this same template with a longer period of time than 30 days? Or we may end up having to say, after sending this to our partners as well, we aren't able to approve it. They're not willing to take on bidding on your site. But you can absolutely reapply when you have more data that shows, like, there's no downside to applying. It doesn't hurt you in any way if you get rejected. So,
Right.
And it's not meant to be like a harsh thing. It's, we're not going to make you sign a contract and lock you into something if we're not going to make you the most money. And that's really kind of where we come at that from.
Exactly. And in fact, it's way more generous than some, I've seen some ad networks that require 100,000, or at least they used to. So it's way more generous than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it comes down to, when is it worth it? Right.
Right.
And
there's got to be a diminishing point of return.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, at about 25,000 sessions or roughly 30,000 page views a month, you're at least making a return on investment. Your hosting is covered and your cost of ingredients or crafting supplies or whatever the case may be are covered. And so it starts to look more like a business and less like a hobby.
So I think it's interesting that a lot of people may look at Mediavine only as an advertising network because that's their interface with it. But you all are so much more. Can you tell me how you describe Mediavine to people?
So I really kind of always start with our mission statement, which was crafted by one Eric Hochberger, and he didn't even want to say it out loud. He wanted it to be a collaborative effort, but it's so perfect. And that's helping content creators build sustainable businesses. So for us, it's not about the ads. Like, yes, the ads help pay for everything, but ads are just the beginning. For us, we want website owners that want their website around for 20 years, 30 years, want to be able to hand it off to their kids. We want them to have that opportunity. And I think we come at that from that way because we are also publishers. We want to be able to hand these businesses off to our kids, right? And so that's really where we come at it from. And that's the driving force behind everything you're seeing come from us this year, right? Or in last year. So Mediavine Create, which is our most valuable content plugin. And then we recently announced that we're going to be doing a WordPress WordPress framework with a bunch of child themes. There hasn't really been any updates, meaningful updates to, like, for example, Genesis. I think we talked about
Yes.
the other day with Josh that Genesis is like 7 years old now. That's that's insane in web years, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and Eric gets very,
Right.
very excited about Trellis and Create, but very, very excited about Trellis because it will change the game as far as WordPress is concerned.
I'm very excited to hear more about that. But the point being made here is, it seems to me like you look at what bloggers are going through, and you see where there are holes in the experience, and
Mhm.
you're filling in those holes. Like Create is a great example.
Yes,
And it's
exactly.
the perfect segue into, bloggers were having trouble with I'm thinking particularly of the card that is used for food bloggers, because that's who mostly listens to this
Right.
podcast. There was a lot of controversy and struggle going on with the recipe cards.
Yeah, I mean, schema is hard, and recipe cards have
Yep.
been around for a long time, even back since Google was using H recipe, right? But
Yes.
the thing that so first of all, it all sort of started with because Food Fanatic doesn't run on WordPress, and the card that we run on Food Fanatic was built by Eric, and he built it to Amber's dream requests, right? So like
Yeah.
like there's a perfect spot for the ad, and there is support for affiliate links with like visual, like actual pictures of the
Yes.
items. And we used to get emails all the time about, I want this for my blog. How can I get it? And so I had said to Eric way back, even like at the start of Food Fanatic, like, can we build this so that other food bloggers can use it? And it was always just kind of in the back of our minds. And that's how Create started. But then it sort of developed even more into something bigger than just food blogging when we realized that we had some crafters amongst our midst that were using recipe cards for their crafting instructions to be able to print craft instructions and like supply lists,
Yes.
but they were using a food card. So basically, they were marking up all of those items as edible ingredients, which is
So are you saying there was no craft card before?
no, there is, and there still isn't beyond
Wow.
Create. It just does not exist. Like basically, it's an entire niche that's been ignored, right? And so then Eric will tell you the sort of mind-blowing moment when he was talking with Ethan. We were at Haven, which is a crafting conference, and he got to talking to one of our developers, Ethan, and it blew Create wide open to other niches.
Wow.
Yeah, so the story behind that is originally we were planning on kind of spinning off Create and having a whole separate kind of lightweight version for craft bloggers. And then Ethan, one of our developers, kind of already had this kind of, I want to call it like a working demo where he kind of worked his way backwards from schema.
Yes.
So schema being kind of the format of how we output everything to Google, and kind of went from schema instead to start designing the cards. So cards are literally built from schema instead of the other way around, where you build a card and then it outputs schema, but schema dictates how we build our cards. And the reason why that's so key is because now there is a how-to schema. And so he just took the how-to schema, kind of plugged into the generator, and it spit out, here's the new interface for entering in craft cards, and here's the new interface for building craft cards. And the reason why that's so cool is because there's actually hundreds of schemas out there. And there's a lot of verticals that have never had a card in the way that recipe cards are so prolific in food. And we're the first to craft. There's also travel, which is coming next.
I was going to ask
so
you
there's
that.
a ton of different travel cards.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of other things. And a lot of things that's so cool about this is that bloggers who blog about food don't just blog about food. A ton of them blog about travel.
Yeah.
And they're going to see all the other stuff that I don't really want to reveal yet. But as we start to reveal more of these card types, I think everyone's going to be like, oh, I write about that. I could totally use that on my blog. Or give people ideas of new things to even write about. And that's kind of the idea behind Create, is it's going to be kind of that one-stop shop.
Every time I talk with you all, you've got some secret you can't share with me.
Well, I mean, you can go and look, anybody can go and look at schema.org and see all the different sort of content types that they have available, right? Like the crazy thing for us is that once we started looking at it from that aspect, we realized that like this is something that even the Hollywood gossip and TV fanatic will be able to use, because there's schema for things like TV reviews. It's crazy.
I never knew that. Well, I know right now you have 3 cards, right? It's like the crafts, the recipes, and lists.
Yeah. So lists has been kind of a game changer. I think we've had more people adopting Create from the list standpoint than anything else. I think Eric explains lists a little bit better than I can.
All right. So lists, as they're called in the schema world, is item lists. Basically mark up just any list of items on your site. So that could be a list of, here's my top, restaurants. Here are my top chicken recipes. Here are like 12 destinations you need to go to, whatever it may be. As long as it could even be, these are the 10 best laptops of 2018. Whatever it is, they want you to mark up your item lists in this kind of format. And on the Google side of things, they actually have been requesting these item lists forever, and nobody has given that to them prior to Create. And so what Create lets you do is we let you mark up either kind of blog posts or any other Create card itself. So if you have a recipe or a craft or just a regular article, you can kind of put them all together in a list. So we're going to mark that all up for Google. And now Google is going to use them in what's called a carousel. So if you're on a mobile search result, sometimes you'll see multiple pictures next to one search result. And so that might be your site now. If someone's doing a search for something that's like a plural search, let's say someone's looking for best chicken recipes. And if you now have a blog post called best chicken recipes and it contains a list, you're going to be eligible now for a carousel under your result, which is going to make your result, like 3 to 4 times the size of the real estate you get in those search results. And Google's been begging for this. And literally until Create started doing it, no recipe card was marking up in that way.
I mean, talk about a huge hole. I mean, that's just amazing that nobody has already, hasn't done that already. That's impressive.
Yeah, I always like to joke and say that we just started thinking 4th dimensionally, right? Which is
yes, it feels that way.
Yeah, which is a Back to the Future quote. But Eric, what were you going to say? Because I could tell you were about to go somewhere with that.
No, it's just that was literally like harvesting these kind of schema things, and that's what you're going to see us keep revealing. There's so much out there, and just I don't know, no one just kind of sat down and kind of thought about things from the reverse. I guess that's what's making this so different. Yeah. Thanks to that, again, that kind of mind-blowing thing from Ethan, like, oh yeah, we should really take the schema and have that dictate how we kind of build these cards. And of course, we build on top of schema because there's a lot of, I think, kind of requirements, obviously, that bloggers are going to have that they want for their site that may not be part of schema. So we add on top of it, but that's kind of like the framework, the bones for how we kind of design new cards and new features.
It sure sounds like, though, that Create is going to be something that's going to be for almost any blogger by the time you're done. So I'm kind of curious if you are regretting the decision to make it free.
Not even a little bit, as far as I know.
Okay, good.
Eric?
I feel like that was such an Amber question. No, so we have very purposely made Create free, and even the features that are normally reserved for more premium stuff are even currently free. Things like automatic nutrition calculation, and a lot of kind of features we're going to be adding. And that's because I'm going to say that it's free, but you got to remember that it's still supported by ads at the end of the day, like so much other free content out there, like the same way television shows and the same way your own websites are supported by ads. Create is supported by ads. At the end of the day, we want Create adoption amongst the Mediavine publishers, because if they're using that, we can help them monetize better, run faster sites, and all the things that we say are best practices to help people make more money and get more traffic. If they're getting more traffic, making more money, at the end of the day, so are we. So it is still ad supported. There is still not like ulterior motives. It's just we're in this to help everyone make more money.
Right.
And if non-Mediavine publishers use it, we think that's also a great thing. It helps them grow to become the size to be Mediavine publishers. And if you're that size and you're with someone else and running Mediavine, that's still fine. We think it's just making the web a better place, and we're okay with that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a user that's not on Mediavine, but they use the Create card. Do they have to be open to allowing advertisements in the Create card?
No.
Okay.
It just means we didn't prevent, like, say, another ad provider from putting ads in the Create card. We actually make it very simple for them to do so.
Okay.
It really, honestly, I don't know if you know that Eric Hochberger is a little obsessed with page speed. I don't know if you've ever heard that before.
I have. You've made me aware of that. Yes.
Really, like, one of the things about Create that he just insisted upon, like, the second he started hiring WordPress developers, was, you're not going to build crap that slows people's websites down, to excuse my French, but that is, sort of the directive that anybody working with Mediavine has, is you will not slow our bloggers' websites down. And when we say our bloggers, we don't just mean the people that are using our ads. We mean the people that are using any product that we might ever put out, right? And so I know of at least one blogger who switched from another very popular recipe plugin to Create, ran her site through Google PageSpeed Insights before and after ditching the other plugin, and her site speed went up by 20 points with literally just that change. So it really is something that, yes, ads are important to this in terms of, like, long-term paying for the kind of development that we want to keep doing. But more than anything, like, no one has been doing this with site speed in mind, with SEO in mind, with ads in mind. And that's where we went at it from, is, we know that site speed now more than ever, with Lighthouse being released to Google PageSpeed Insights and basically probably running part of the algorithm, is that site speed is more important than ever. So we're dedicated to building products that cater to that, because no one else seems to be paying attention to it.
Yeah. So it's, a great opportunity.
It is.
People are desperate for tools that are also keep their site fast.
Yes. And it's not something that's easy for anyone to do. I mean, when the latest version of Lighthouse was released to PageSpeed Insights, poor Eric spent a solid 2 weeks, like, just working on the Hollywood gossip, because he was not going to sit on his laurels when our page speed scores dropped a bunch when Lighthouse came out. And he's got the technical know-how to do that kind of stuff. But the general blogger of every day, I mean, I certainly don't have the technical know-how to do most of that stuff. And I don't think most of our customers do. And so if we can make that easier, we're not only helping their website and their reader retention, we're helping our ad performance, we're helping their search result performance. Like, it's the thing I always say, rising tides lift all ships. And the rising tide here is paying attention to page speed and giving people the tools to help them do that.
And this is probably a stupid question, but I feel like I want to ask it anyway. And that is, my understanding is that the schema format for recipe plugins has to appease both Google and Pinterest, but they are both slightly different. Is that something that Create does?
That's an Eric question.
So that's kind of, that was more of an issue. Okay. So I think that was probably about almost a year ago now. There's basically two forms of schema. One is JSON LD, which is kind of the newer format, and the other one was kind of inline markup. I don't remember even the name of it. And Pinterest was only compatible with the old and not the new. And so at the time, a lot of plugins had to kind of support both. And the issue, if you support both, is that you're technically sending that same recipe to Google twice, because they can read both the old and the new. So that wasn't even best practice, but that's what a lot of them were kind of doing to try to hybrid support both. Luckily, Create launched after the fact that Pinterest added support for the new format. I don't think anyone's ever going back to the old at this point, because New technology is generally what someone new entering the space would adopt. So Create out the gate only supports JSON LD format.
Nice. That's good. I know another question people are going to ask when they're interested in the recipe card is, will it provide nutritional information?
Yeah, I'm terrible at pronouncing their name. Is it Nutritionix?
I think so.
It's one of those things it's one of those things you always see written out. We don't talk to them on the phone all the time. We'll say emails. But we basically partnered with a company, Nutritionix, to do the automatic nutrition calculation. And the way, again, it's paid for by Mediavine. No one has to worry about what the actual Nutritionix, other than the fact you should know that it is being powered by a third party, because it's important to know with any automatic nutrition calculation, it's being done by a computer. It's not being done in a lab by, a scientist, registered dietitian. It's being done by a computer. So we want to make sure everyone's aware of that. But yeah, that's actually built in to Create Now and free for all publishers, Mediavine and non-Mediavine publishers. All it takes is a simple registration, which involves literally just creating kind of a Create account. And once you have that, you get access to nutrition calculation for free. And it's pretty darn accurate. It uses kind of like natural language processing or kind of like AI to be able to parse kind of the way you write things. And I think Amber found something really cool that it was like, even if you're adding like a pinch of like, what was it? Parmesan cheese?
Oh yeah. It was Parmesan cheese. So like someone was asking, how does it handle if I were to add an ingredient that's like Parmesan cheese for serving, right? So say you did a spaghetti and meatballs thing and you had Parmesan cheese for serving. Does it add like any amount, the pinch or the whatever it may be? And it actually is smart enough to know what the average pinch is, and it will add that to the nutrition and divide it out by the number of servings you have.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's really, really cool. We went through a lot of iterations and a lot of companies we talked to about how to process that and how to, provide this to folks, because we didn't release with it, but we knew that it was going to be a pretty early on adoption or push into the plugin. Adoption is not the right word. And so we went back and forth. Are we going to build it ourselves? And luckily we found Nutritionix, and they do a pretty dang good job. So
yeah, it's nice not to have to build that yourself too, because that seems like it would be really complicated.
You have no idea. Just trying to explain to the guys, like one of the things we're working on right now with it is everyone really would like for us to have like changing of serving sizes and stuff. And other plugins do this currently, but they don't really do it very accurately.
Right.
But I don't think it's something that bloggers check too often. They literally just want the option. And the problem is when you look at things like, say, for example, a bread recipe, right?
Yeah.
You may not know this unless you're an avid baker, but when you bake bread, if you double your recipe, you should not double your yeast. The yeast remains the same. So just doubling or tripling or quadrupling the numbers is not accurate.
Right.
And if you know anything about Mediavine,
you're going to be accurate.
We don't do things in a half-hearted way.
Right.
Like we're going to push out the best possible product that we can. And so it doesn't sit right with any of us to try and push out a feature like that without giving it some serious thought.
What about conversion to metric? Does it do that?
Doesn't do that yet for exactly the same reason.
Got you.
There are other plugins that do it, but it's not accurate. And we've studied that extensively and found that it's not accurate. So finding a way to do that, like it supports, for example, if you wanted to put a metric number, it will support and understand that, but it doesn't convert them back and forth.
Got you.
Right.
Maybe that's something down the road. You never know, right?
Oh yeah. No, it's something we're definitely like continually talking. I think we even had a call like last week or God, what year is it? Monday, maybe we had a call about it where we're trying to figure out the right way to do it and the right way to how long do we need to think about it before we can start doing stuff? Because again, we don't want to do it wrong. We don't want to push it out there just to say that we have the feature, knowing that it's giving inaccurate information. That's not okay by any of us.
Yeah. Nothing is better than inaccurate, right? Like not having the conversion is better than than providing it and it's not right.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. We've go back and forth about that and go round and round with our publisher engineering team, which is responsible for all this stuff, to try and figure out what the right thing is. Because again, they're coming at this from a development standpoint, and they can probably figure out ways to do it, but knowing that it wouldn't be accurate information. Like they've listened to myself and to Nicole, who's our director of publisher accounts, and to Heather, who's director of publisher support. All of us are bloggers. All of us are food bloggers. And we're just not willing to put something like that on a friend's website. So we don't.
So what about photos? This may not be as much of a problem these days as it used to be. It seems like it used to be you could put your photo in the card and it still wouldn't show up in Google searches. Is that been worked out with Create as well?
Eric?
So that, interestingly enough, wasn't a Create issue, but rather kind of a Google thing. It was actually widespread, I think, to all kind of plugins. But I think a lot of people seem to attribute it with Create at the beginning, but it was kind of revealed that people were running into those issues everywhere. So one of the things to note is that we follow kind of schema to the T. We check the Google version. So Google has kind of a little, like Google search has their own website separate from schema.org that tells you their best practices for implementing schema. And we actually follow that as well to a T and check that every day, because for some weird reason there's no feed or alerts to tell you when they change it. So we're checking that daily. And one of the things we do is send your image in all 3 aspect ratios that they request. So if you look at the schema that we've been generating, basically since the get-go, has been Google best practices. And so we weren't very concerned that it was going to be a long-term thing. And sure enough, most people that were finding it were kind of on their newer results or things they just switched to Create. And they found like after a week or two, it was suddenly appearing. And that wasn't because Create was changing anything. It was just Google sometimes was taking a bit. And we went into crisis mode because we thought it was us.
We did.
When people first told us that. And if there's one thing like we're going to make sure of at Mediavine, it's always that the SEO is correct. Like that's not something we're ever going to let be wrong. If you think we have a problem with doubling yeast, we're way more upset if we're removing everyone's thumbnails right from search engine results. So yeah, I can positively say that was not a Create issue and that we're doing everything to the best Google practices. And if Google changes, we'll be the first kind of plugin to kind of adopt that stuff. So we're not terribly worried about that problem anymore. It seems like it kind of even has gone away. And it seems like Google seems to no longer be hiccuping on those. But.
Well, at first we thought it was just us. And then I started seeing in the groups that people using other plugins were seeing the exact same thing. And I've never, that was such a sigh of relief. I was like, because we couldn't find anything, right? Like we were checking every single thing that we were doing against what was the officially published schema and best practices across the board. And we were doing everything right. And so we were like, okay, is this a Google thing? Is this a Create thing? And then I saw someone post about it in a group that they were seeing it and they were not running Create. And I don't think I've ever been so happy to see someone have a problem with their website.
You're so relieved.
I know. I feel terrible for that blogger. I'm so sorry, but you gave me such a sigh of relief that day. So yeah, it's one of those things where like Google does what it wants, right? And so we couldn't, for a little while it was like, is it us? But we were doing everything right. And then it's like, well, is Google just doing what it wants here? And that seems to be what it was, right? And it was just that because Create was new, people were pushing out tons of new content that Google was then crawling and not pulling the image for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas this, if you've been using a plugin for 3 years, they're not necessarily going to recrawl that information unless you make a change to it. And so they're like those thumbnails weren't disappearing because they weren't being recrawled.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's why, like, it was just kind of a timing thing. That's why it appeared like it was just a create thing. And then when we realized that it was happening in other places, it was like, okay, this is just Google doing what it wants.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier, Amber, about
Mm-hmm.
Food Fanatic and the fact that the affiliate links would show up in the recipe card and along with the photo of, is that the case with Create as well?
Yes. So we have, Create has affiliate support, like straight out of the gate. It's free for everyone. It will pull in, you use your affiliate link, it'll pull in the image. We've
Yes.
checked with Amazon. That's okay. Don't believe the conspiracy theorists on the internet. And yeah, like honestly, having Create out in the world and being able to see that dream come true and that bloggers are using it and their affiliate income is actually like going up is one of my favorite things about Create. Like, we're literally seeing people report that they're seeing anywhere from a 5 to 15% increase in their affiliate sales in the plugins Facebook group. And I'm just like, are you serious? And of course, some of that was Q4, but some people are seeing it like even now, which tells me that it's more of a sustained thing, which is wonderful. Like, we're always of the mind of like, diversify your income, right? Like, we love that people use us for advertising and things like that, but we don't necessarily want to be responsible for every way that you make money. And so, diversifying in that way is really cool. It's also why we do influencer marketing, right? Like, we have an entire influencer marketing department so that we're covering lots of different bases for bloggers to have ways to make money. And that affiliate section of Create has been like the perfect thing for that.
It is, definitely. Is the card, the way it looks on the site, is that customizable?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I think that one of the interesting things that has come out of this is when we started looking at designing and whatnot, we went to Lindsay from Per Designs and asked her to build us some custom sort of, I guess themes would be the right word for it, some custom themes for the cards. And when she realized that we were doing this, she actually decided that it made sense for her to not bother with her own custom card anymore.
Wow.
So I mean, it blew my mind that she did that, but she was basically like, well, you guys are going to do this better. I, don't love maintaining this. It's been, sort of a required portion of my business, but you're doing everything and people are getting customizable designs and I can then customize on top of them. There's no reason for me to carry on creating a custom card for everybody because
So
I
you're
can
saying that
literally
she takes on new clients for designing a food blog, that she's just basically not even messing with the recipe card anymore.
Right. I mean, like, she will make it look beautiful, but she has you pick a recipe card plugin and she recommends, she's got some recommendations on her website, but then she customizes that. And Eric can talk a little bit more about how the customizations work.
Yeah, so important thing to note is that we went for the developer kind of angle of customizing. So it's more the WordPress style. You use things like hooks and filters. You build your own templates versus doing kind of the drag and drop or the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get style of customizations that some of the other plugins do. Ultimately, if you look at the actual HTML that's generated by kind of a template, it becomes unmaintainable, harder for Google to parse. It's no longer what's called semantic HTML, where you really want to have this is the section, this is the header, this is the footer, where you mark everything up for Google the way HTML has been meant to be used. So that's why, again, as Amber likes to say, we're very opinionated here. So we kind of took a hardline stance, like this is going to be the way you customize it. Of course, customizing things like CSS is definitely available now for even non-programmers, and we'll definitely kind of even help out occasionally. I shouldn't say that on a recorded podcast, but we've been known to help publishers.
Nicole's going to kill you when she hears this.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not supposed to say that, but no. So the way Lindsay's going about this is actually from a development standpoint, because Lindsay knows some programming, and she definitely has a developer I know that can help her with some of the stuff. And so she's able to actually add custom features and all sorts of cool things on top of Create. And any developer is able to do that. We offer like kind of a Slack channel that developers can join, and they can work directly with our developers in order to be able to learn and how to customize. And we're always working on the documentation because we want people to build on top of this stuff. Like that's the idea behind Create. That's going to be the idea behind our Trellis, our framework that's coming out. Like we don't want to make it so that you have to launch your own recipe card if you're looking to have a new design. So that's kind of how she's able to customize it. We want everyone to be able to do that. And we are adding some easier stuff. I know we have like a color picker coming out for like the buttons to be able to kind of match the theme a little bit more. It tries to be clever and inherit as much as it can from your theme, but we're going to let people kind of override that stuff. We want to make it a little bit easier for non-programmers, but if you want to get like down and dirty, like you're going to have to use a programmer to do it. And that's to make sure it's the right way. It's done the right way. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say what it sounds like what you're saying though is that you kind of created this Slack channel where people can, do that more easily. In other words, if I could get my designer to get on that and talk with you all, that might help.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. We want to create kind of this, kind of community of developers that can kind of start building on this stuff. And that's not, again, just going to be with Create, but that's the entire idea behind Trellis. Trellis is a framework. It's not a theme. And we are going to build child themes in the same way that we shipped Create with themes, but we still want everyone to be able to create their own. If you want to customize your site, it's your site. We want to give you that ability. We just want to give you the tools.
I mean, what a great name, right? I mean, that's what a trellis does, right? Let's something else grow on it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Oh, if you knew the conversations that went into naming it. Because, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like we're Mediavine. And so we do try to play to that a little bit when we can. And Trellis is perfect for that in so many different ways. So
yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the conversion factor. So let's say, I'm considering switching to Create. How difficult is it going to be for me to transition all my hundreds of recipes over?
Eric, I want to hear you talk about it because I talk about it all the time.
Okay. I know. I feel like these are all Amber questions. I'll hop in. So we have an importer plugin. It's actually separate from the Create plugin, just because it's kind of you use it once and then you throw it away. So we want people to be able to install that and then not have it kind of bog down their server when they're not using it anymore. So that's a one-time install, and it's actually going to help automate most of the import process. And I say most because we still want people to kind of go through and almost check everything by hand. And we kind of make that easy to do inside the interface. You're not actually by hand copying and pasting everything over. It's going to bring everything in, but it's going to alert you to maybe this particular recipe card that came from this plugin you were running 2 years ago, because we've also found that people have not just been running one card over the years, they've been running several. And unfortunately, some people never even fully moved over to their one that they're coming to us from. So we've seen people that have like 3 or 4 different recipe cards that we're importing from. And we have this kind of omni importer that's kind of going to pull it all in at once. And it's going to allow you to kind of move things over. So you can finally ditch, what you might have had in a plugin, like, I don't know, even like zip recipes that's no longer been supported for how many years. We'll still see people that will have stuff in there, like insanity to us.
Yeah, and stuff that they forgot they had in there, really.
Right.
And let's talk about, why is that a problem? It's a problem because, that is no longer, I mean, like, in other words, for search results, I imagine that recipe would not show up. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from a pure SEO standpoint, it's terrible in that you're not keeping up with the latest standards. As I said, we're checking that Google page every day, and it changes like several times a year. And if you're on a plugin that hasn't been updated in 3 years, they're definitely not on JSON LD, and they're definitely not supporting the latest recommended kind of properties. So you're going to be missing out on a lot of stuff in the search results. But from a security standpoint, running an old plugin that hasn't been updated is terrifying. Someone can just sneak into your site through a security vulnerability that pop up all the time in these old plugins because they're using older code and they haven't been maintaining them. Not necessarily a fault of the person who originally wrote this plugin, but it's going to depend on other libraries, and those libraries are not maintained anymore, or it's not being updated to the latest version. So security vulnerabilities are going to happen if you're running old plugins. So that's probably my number one reason to make people move, even more so than SEO. And of course, page speed wise, my little obsession, the more you have running, the more that's slowing down your site, and not necessarily just in the admin or a slower website when you from a hosting or a server standpoint, but also every single one of these you're running tend to run their code on the front end, whether they have a card on that page or not. So a lot of times you're slowing down your entire site when you might not even have a card on that page from that plugin. So you want to make sure that
you might have like 5 outdated like recipes from 2012, but Zip Recipes is running at they may or may not be. I'm not casting aspersions, but a plugin is running when anyone loads any page on your site, period. Whether it's the page
with
the
Zip recipe
because it's old and outdated and no one.
It's not.
Yeah.
It runs it anymore, right?
Right. But like, say for example, someone's accessing a post that you posted today. If you have Zip Recipes on your site or other plugins that have been written in a way where they run at site load, like they're going to load even if they're loading your post from today, even though that that post has no Zip recipe content in it.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
It sounds like it slows things down.
Yes. Yeah, it's completely unneeded. And it was a lazy way to do things way back when people didn't realize how important page speed was.
Right.
So
back in the day when we were all putting GIFs on our site, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So have you run into, like you're talking about these people that may have 2 or 3 different recipe cards or systems on their site. I mean, have you run into any that, people just have to manually do this, or so far it's worked for everything?
Eric could probably speak more to that than I could, but like for me personally, the only, like I actually don't have Create across Bluebonnet Baker entirely yet, but that's because I never moved to a recipe card, period.
I see.
So I'm using, and it probably is going to horrify Eric, but Bluebonnet Baker has this plugin that was written by Jaden Hare's husband, Scott, years and years ago, called Print This, that basically would allow you to put 2 short codes around a section of content that you wanted to be able to be printed, and would give you a little print button, right? Didn't mark anything up, just sort of gave a visual difference and the ability to only print that part of your blog post. And so I actually there's no way for Create to understand that and manually bring that information automatically bring that information in. So I have to go back and do that manually. But I don't think we've run into anything other than that sort of situation where like someone who's coming, say for example, Blogger, they just moved to WordPress. Blogger typically does not have a recipe card unless you're making the schema yourself. And so there's not a way to pull that in. Eric, are there any instances you can think of?
No, I mean, we support all the major plugins that anyone's really been running. I mean, unless it's an obscure one that we've never heard of, or if it was a custom one. And the only custom one we really support is the per design one. Yeah. So other than that, I mean, if it's a custom or a small one, we might not be able to import, or if something like Amber said, it was never kind of done in a structured way before, it would be impossible for us to import. So no, other than that, it should be pretty easy. We've have put a lot of love into that importer. We have an entire developer whose sole purpose for the last however many months, it's probably going insane, has been maintaining that. So we have a lot of resources towards helping you import.
I love that. And if I remember right, Amber, I think you mentioned in the Facebook group that it's actually pretty easy. If somebody wants to get in there and just try it, they don't have to commit to anything. They can actually just load the plugin and try it on one recipe.
Exactly.
Right?
So that again is another method to our madness with keeping the importer separate. It's not going like when you install it, it's not going to come up and be like, hey, convert all your recipes. That's not what it's going to do. It's literally just going to give you the option to build out a Create card. And you can see what it looks like, and you can see what the UI is like. And if you like the output, you can mess around with choosing a different theme, placement of the Pinterest button, all of those things, and see if you like it. before you commit to anything. And then the other thing that's really important about the importer that's really cool, I think, is because we've made it sort of this omni importer and we're pulling from all the old data that's on your site. We've made it so that you can sort of stop and restart the import. So you check them as you go. And obviously the stuff that you wrote 3 years ago might need a little massaging in terms of like how you used to write your recipe. You may want to check that the ingredients are right. You probably want to do things like add keywords, because that was not really a field that was available to your recipe card plugin 3 years ago. It's a recent field. You may want to add a video. Those kinds of things that were not available for a plugin that you were using 3 years ago. This sort of allows you the ability to fix that stuff in your own time and in your own way, without having to just like do a whole bucket of everything and then there's stuff messed up on your site. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of intentional thought about what we had experienced, meaning we, the collective, we, all the food bloggers at Mediavine that work for our company, in what we had experienced in switching recipe cards before. That I think it shows in the importer, because it's not as overwhelming as it could be. And it also allows you to fix the things that might allow you to rank better.
Exactly. It sounds like, you thought about past experiences and decided that we're going to make this better.
Yeah.
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 What about adding video to the recipe card? I mean, that could be kind of tricky for some people. Does it work pretty well in the Create card?
I'm going to let Eric talk about it.
So if you're I figure you're just going to keep passing the fun ones to me. If you're a Mediavine publisher and you use the Mediavine dashboard for your videos, the Mediavine video player, it's a joke. As long as you're logged in through the Mediavine control panel, which is our ad plugin, and you're authenticated in there, it's literally a drop down for the video. You just pick which video is assigned and you're done. If it's something like YouTube, I believe we have YouTube support as well. Because as we said, Mediavine Create is not just for Mediavine publishers. So we've made that one a little bit easier as well. But as far as Mediavine publishers who are using us for their video are going to love it. It's a drop down.
Oh, that makes it so much easier. To, pick it from the list.
Oh, definitely.
So what have I missed about, questions related to the recipe card? Is there some other big factor? It seems like we covered a lot on that.
I think some neat stuff besides just kind of the page speed is also the ad side of things. I do have to say that Create is going to perform better in terms of advertising than any other recipe card. And that's kind of because we've designed each of the themes with that in mind. And we're able to give publishers better controls and tighter integration with our ad technology. So for example, lists are able to, you can say, I want ads to appear after every X list items, and those ads are just going to automatically appear. Within the recipe card itself, you can say how frequently you want ads to be inserted, and we actually now support multiple ads inside the recipe card, and we'll space them per kind of those CBA guidelines, but letting you choose how often, CBA is Coalition for Better Ads, and that's kind of the Google standards for how often you can insert ads without harming the user experience. And so we're going to allow you to have multiple ads for your longer form recipe card content, and you get to choose that all right within there. And so it's like a tight, great integration for Mediavine publishers that are using us for ads. So that's another great feature that I don't know if everyone's quite aware of. And obviously the affiliate stuff that we already touched on is only getting expanded. The lists are only getting better. And of course, the ability to run Create cards that are not just for food, we think is exciting even for food bloggers, because I don't think food bloggers always blog exclusively about food.
Absolutely. Yeah, drop that in there. And it's providing a spot, like the way that we feel about this, right? About anything that's in a recipe card or a printable card in general, right? Is that it's your most valuable content. Right. So one of the things that we learned from the ad side of the business when we first started, people thought we were crazy for putting an ad in the recipe card. But what we were seeing on Food Fanatic and our first couple of food bloggers was that was actually the most valuable ad spot on the entire page, because no matter how a reader was coming into your site, all roads led to the recipe card.
Right.
And so by pushing Create out to other genres of blogging, we are providing them with that same user experience, that same most valuable piece of content in a user-friendly, printable thing that's great, especially, for readers who want that sort of thing. But also providing you with sort of a way to guide your reader down the page so that, yes, obviously they see all of your ads, but also keeping them on your site longer, because they'll start to expect that, right? Like, bloggers didn't have recipe cards when food blogging started 20 years ago with, the Julie and Julias of the world.
Right.
And
That's right.
now readers expect it. And our feeling is that if we can provide that information to travel and to craft and to finance and to, all these things, readers will come to expect it as part of their experience on your website. And it will only lead to all these wonderful things. If we keep providing, if enough DIY bloggers and craft bloggers provide Google with the how-to schema, Google will start looking at that information in the same way that they did recipe cards years ago. They didn't start out looking for that information, and they certainly didn't display all of the information that they display today, right? Even when we were providing it, things like prep time and servings and things like that, those were not in the search results when we all first started using recipe cards. And so our feeling is that if we can get enough bloggers doing this stuff, we're actually going to change the algorithms a little bit, because they're going to start, they know that it's valuable information. That's the whole reason it lives on schema.org to begin with.
Right.
And so we can actually sort of provide actionable change, not only to the search engines, but to how the reader's interacting with your site. And that's a big deal.
That is a big deal, for sure. And I also love that, of all the things that we have to be on top of, what if Google, like, for example, Google changed their mind and they added keywords, or they, they to the recipe card, or they want video. That's not something I'd have to worry about, because you're going to let me know when that happens, right?
Right. We're going to push out an update to the card, and we're going to probably provide some sort of pop-up within WordPress that says, hey, this is the thing.
Gotta do this now.
Yeah.
Whether you all frantically go in, add keywords.
Whether you want to do that to all of them at once, or just start doing it going forward, here's the field.
What would be nice is, it would be so cool if I could push a button that would say, make my keyword the same as the title in my recipe card. And then, most of mine are like that, but there are some that are different.
Right.
But
so
for the most part, that would be accurate.
Eric could explain this better than me, probably, but the keyword stuff is actually more like desserts, baking, vegan, not what your actual post title keyword is.
So the post title might be orange cranberry muffins, but the keyword is going to be more vegan muffins?
Well, yeah. So it's going to be keyword. It's whatever keywords sort of overarchingly describe your recipe. Right, Eric? I'm not getting that wrong. It's been a long day.
No, that's correct.
Oh, great.
They do give good examples, but I will say the example is that they say not to do is dessert. No, so if you go to the Google search page, and again, we can provide this link to anyone. They give examples of the keywords they're expecting, and one particular thing they're saying is, they're like winter apple pie, nutmeg crust. So just go into a bunch of keywords that describe that particular thing you're making. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the one keyword or the keywords you're going after in the post, but the best thing you can think of if someone was looking for that particular recipe, what keywords describe it, which I know doesn't super help, but don't think of things just like dessert, baking. Think of the most descriptive keywords you can.
I see. And my understanding is this is for visually impaired more than anything. Is that correct?
The weird part is I don't think they're actually using the keywords anywhere yet.
Oh, okay.
And so what you kind of see a lot of with Google is, as Amber said, right? Like they are already parsing how to. but they're not using it yet.
I see.
And so a lot of times they're going to recommend these things because they need to collect enough recipes with something to be able to launch a new feature.
Right.
Right. So we don't really necessarily see, so the video, we're not entirely sure where they're using that yet, right? Like sometimes you'll get a little play button if you're in a recipe carousel from having it. But we also see that from people if you just have a regular video in the post. So we're not sure entirely what they're doing with some of these things yet. It's not as obvious as things like calories where they display it in the actual search result. Keywords, not entirely sure, but I'm going to be guessing they're building some sort of recipe search type thing that we're going to see coming out where those keywords will matter. So I would certainly do them at this point, but make sure they're not the same as your category or your cuisine. So not things like baking, not things like, well, in the example of the pie, they say don't use American. Not that anyone would ever say American for
American pie,
an ethnicity of their pie, right? But with that kind of idea, don't use Chinese, entree. Like that's literally the opposite of what they're trying to get you to do.
I see. I'll have to look into that more because I'm definitely, I have actually just been trying to think of keywords I think that reflect the recipe. Like, brownies would be a good example. If it's would you just say brownies or would you say it's walnut brownies?
I think walnut brownies.
Oh, definitely walnut brownies for sure.
Got you. So
be a bit more specific, I guess, is the point we're making there.
Got you.
So you shouldn't be using, like, for example, the same keywords across all of your certain like vegan baking recipes. You should be using unique ones for each post.
Yes, I love it. And I'm going to encourage people, even if they already feel confident in their recipe card, it sounds like we should all be downloading and using Create, even from the list perspectives, or if we have some DIY, but also just because it sounds like exciting things coming down the road for it too. So,
yeah. And it's funny, we actually do have a lot of people who've sort of adopted it specifically because of lists and have no intention of using it for their recipes, which we're always like, have you even tried that? Because the feedback that we get for the UI of adding the recipe is a lot of times or the how-to or whatever, because they're the same, is this is so intuitive, this is so beautiful, because there's like a live preview and all of these things that are all the things that we wished for as bloggers. And so, like, my thing would be, I get that you're confident in your plugin, or that you've already paid for a year and you don't want to like have that be lost money. Totally get it. My only request would be at least look at the UI and what it would be like to push out a recipe with Create, or a how-to card, or eventually a top places card, things like that. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I think beyond that, the exciting thing is exactly what you said. It's what's to come to Create. I think the exciting part is we have a pretty large development team, 7 developers at the moment that are kind of geared towards just this stuff. We have 2 designers. So you're going to see a lot of things coming to Create that traditional WordPress plugins, by their very nature, can't have that kind of resources thrown at it. If you're making your money in a traditional kind of WordPress plugin and you're hoping to have 100 people paying you a subscription fee, you can't afford one full-time developer, let alone a team of them. So it's unfair, but it's great for the publishers. They're going to get kind of more of an enterprise type solution for free, even when the paid options don't have the same resources. So we think it's really exciting, the stuff we're going to be able to do. We think lists is just the start of it. As Amber was saying, like all the stuff that's coming for travel and the other niches are going to be great. But even just food bloggers who only blog about food are going to find a lot of features in there that are not going to be coming to other cards. And if they do, it's going to be not done as well.
So where would you like people to go if they're curious about Create and they want to learn more? Where should they go?
Probably the WordPress repository is a good spot to start. You can search for Create by Mediavine. We also have a Facebook group that's specifically for the card. You do not have to be a Mediavine publisher to be in that group. Just if you're using the card or want to use the card, you can go and join it. Where else, Eric?
That's literally an Amber question.
Ah,
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing
it's
to
been a
do is
long day.
that's fair. You could, I mean, honestly, just try it. It's free. If you download it, install it, and hate it, and uninstall it, no hard feelings. So try it, and try it again in the future. Even if you don't like it today, it's only going to get better. So I think the best thing to do is literally just try it. There's no cost to doing it. It's super easy to set up. It's available in the WordPress repo. So from your plugin page, you can search for it. I don't think we think we put a lot of effort and love into kind of the user interface of what it's like to actually input in recipes. And I think you'll find it's easier to use than the other ones. It's going to create a prettier, faster, better optimized output. So it seems like we don't see a reason you're not going to want to use this. So try it.
And if you do come up with a reason, email us. Because even if you
You
stop,
want to know about it.
because even if you stop using it, we want to make it better. So, and like Eric said, we've got those 7 developers and 2 designers that basically, if we get, enough commentary saying that this is the thing we need. I mean, we're seeing that with lists right now. One of the first things that people gave us really strong feedback about was that they wanted to have a way to put some additional text in the lists. And we pushed out a release pretty quickly that allowed them to do that. So, that's sort of the unfair thing that Eric is talking about, is basically with this plugin, you can tell us, we want this thing. And if enough people are like, oh, yes, I could use it this way and this way and this way, we're obviously going to put development hours behind that and push it out as quickly as we can.
Well,
so
that's not unfair for, somebody who's using the card, because they get the benefit of that.
Well,
Yes.
exactly. Right. Yeah. The benefit of having all these people behind it is absolutely going to be in your hands as the user of it. So
when is I'm just curious, when is the Mediavine conference? That's coming up soon, isn't it?
It is. So we've got Chicago in June, and then we've got Austin in November. And we're actually already planning 2020.
Oh my goodness, it's too soon.
So our event coordinator would tell you it is not too soon.
I'm sure. I've been there. I know how that goes.
She's already freaking out. So
we have to have these details figured out. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to put a plug in for your podcast, Amber. I encourage everybody to go and listen to Theory of Content. I've learned so much from listening to you and Josh talk about things.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. Josh is a good guy. He's been Eric's friend for a really long time. And it's kind of weird for me because he knows Eric from way, way back. And so Josh and I are friends, and we both have this common work husband. So, that's always fun for both of us.
Yes, I love that too. Okay, well, Amber and Eric, I have had a really great time talking with you all today. And thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Marley.
We really appreciate it, Marley. We'll always help wherever we can to hang out on the Chopped podcast. It's fun for us.
Thanks to Amber and Eric for being my guests on today's episode of the Chopped podcast. Be sure to sign up today for the Chopped Academy's Grow Your Food Blog webinar. Food blogging is tricky business, so learning some tools to help you run it and understand it like a pro is so important. Go to chopped.academy/grow today to register for early bird pricing. Thanks to everyone for your support of the Chopped podcast. Your reviews on iTunes and Stitcher make such a big difference. It takes only a few seconds of your time, and it really means so much. Are you loving the Chopped podcast? Take a photo of yourself or a screenshot of your phone while listening to today's episode and share it with me using #ChoppedPodcast. I love your enthusiasm and support. You inspire me, and I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.